Hello, Whitman-Hanson. I'm Victoria Consolini, and this is my co-host, Victoria Murphy. We're here on behalf of the mock trial team interviewing State Representative Geoff Diehl. Mr. Diehl, thank you for coming in today.
Victoria, thanks for having me.
Mr. Diehl is the Republican candidate for the 7th Plymouth District. Mr. Diehl, could you please tell us a little about yourself?
Sure. I live in Whitman with my wife, Kathy Jo, and my two daughters, Kaylee and Emily. They both go to Conley School, and my wife happens to also be the director for the Whitman Youth Cheerleading, and she owns a business, Boss Academy, which I think some students here may go to. So that's our community involvement. I'm also involved with the Abington Lions Club, the East Bridgewater Business Association, which is like a Chamber of Commerce, the Metro South Chamber of Commerce, and the South Shore Chamber of Commerce. Those are sort of the things I do in the district.
Thank you. And now for some questions regarding your political views. Budget cuts in our school district have repeatedly put the jobs of our teachers at stake, as well as risking many of the unique programs offered by our school. What do you plan to do to help our local educational system?
Well, before I ran for state representative, I was on the Whitman Finance Committee, and I was the liaison to the Whitman-Hanson School Board, and so I went to the meetings quite often, and I heard, and this was one of the big reasons I ran for office, was the fact that the state had been cutting local aid, but also Chapter 70, which is education funding to our towns, and I wanted to make decisions and votes that would maybe change that. And so I understand it's very difficult. I mean, teachers every year aren't sure whether they're going to be hired back again the next year, and it's a difficult position for them, for students and parents. Everybody gets very anxious by the time town budgets come around, and so it's very important to make sure Chapter 70 education funding is restored. And this year, we were actually able to, in this session, restore $600,000 to the district for Chapter 70 education formula. So it's one of the priorities that I have. And the other thing I think people need to know too is that the current Chapter 70 funding formula is a 20-year-old formula that I think needs revamping. Estimates are that we're probably about $2 billion short in the overall amount that we really should be funding our schools, because two categories within Chapter 70 are really out of whack. One is the healthcare costs, which have been spiraling out of control for a while, and so for all the staff of all the schools, that really puts the school budget in a big bind. The other thing is special needs cost. With ever-growing IEPs for students that are very specific and costly, we need to, I think, add more money in to take care of special ed funding needs. So those are two specific aspects that I think need to be part of the overall look at Chapter 70 funding formula.
Okay.
How do you plan to help small businesses in the town?
Small businesses, well, again, my wife owns a small business, and I used to work for a small business. There's two things. One is cutting regulation and fees up at the State House. When I was elected, people came to me who owned small businesses and would tell me stories about how it was very difficult to get a license for either a transportation company or a company that does paving that's based out of Whitman, for example, told me that their fees for registering their trucks and their trailers had doubled overnight. Basically, one year it was this, the next year it was twice as much. So I talked to the Secretary of Transportation, Richard Davey, and asked him why that happened, and he said, well, we had a budget shortfall, and we had to make it up somewhere. And so what I did was filed an amendment to the budget that said, let's not just allow random fee increases, but let's do at least a percentage increase so that businesses will know at least their costs will be X, Y, or Z, not just out of the blue a huge hit. The other thing, too, is to help small businesses. We need to get, I think students, like in high school and college, who are coming out of college especially, into jobs. And that's the big word that you hear about in this election cycle all across the country is jobs. In Massachusetts, it's no different. We have a lower unemployment rate, but it's still fairly high versus where we need to be. And so we need to get kids who are coming out of school into jobs or help them start a company. And one of the things I thought was very neat, I met two students from Whitman-Hanson over at the Bayweb, Brockton Area Work Investment Board, who had taken part in an entrepreneur competition, and one was a photographer and one was did lawn services, right? So it sparked an idea that I had, which was to take state-owned buildings and that are empty and let small companies go into them maybe at no charge for a few years so that they can get that business started. It's like an incubator program, and now I'm working with Bridgewater State University to actually flesh that idea out because they think it's a good model. And what we'll do is, again, let people come in, and we lost a big company like Facebook, went out to California from Massachusetts. Well, let's have the next Facebook start right here in Whitman or Hanson in one of the state-owned buildings that's not being used. Let those kids grow that business, or those college students that come out that graduated, start a business and keep it here. And that's one of the goals I think I have to help small business.
It's a great idea.
Thank you.
This next question regards transportation in the district. The district currently budgets over $1 million in transportation. Because Whitman-Hanson is a regional school district, the district cannot legally charge for busing of students who live 1.5 miles more from their schools. Regional transportation reimbursement from the state has not been fully funded at 100%, and we cannot charge for transportation. As a result, the district pays for a major portion of busing costs. In order to save teaching positions, the start times of schools, the high school, Conley, and Duval, were adjusted to reduce transportation costs and save teaching positions. This has resulted in an early start time, which is challenging for students and staff at the high school. What do you plan to do about the laws regarding regional transportation?
Well, that's a lot right there, and everything that's in that question is accurate. And again, having 2 daughters that go to Conley, I can tell you my wife and I are personally affected by having to adjust your work schedule. So parents out there that are dealing with trying to keep a job or maybe 2 jobs and then trying to juggle all that, plus get their kids off to school, this is a huge impact. And this is another sort of problem with these unfunded mandates that are happening up at the State House. Now this regional transportation, the promise of regionalization has never really been fully followed through on. You know, we should be getting 100% reimbursement for our transportation costs, but what they decided over time was, well, if we do that, theoretically the towns or the schools or the busing companies may not really be accountable for creating the most effective route and getting the kids most efficiently. So what they said was, we need to have the towns and the schools and the bus companies have skin in the game by putting a portion of that 100% reimbursement back on them. So we never really formalized that with a law that says the reimbursement will not be 100% but will be X%, but we probably should do something like that. But beyond that, we haven't really even fully funded adequately what the towns need, especially in areas like the suburban areas where you've got a lot more ground to cover, and and with the cost of gas now being close to $4 a gallon, I mean, you can imagine what the school's going through right now with their budget, having to deal with just, again, spiraling costs that they can't control. So it's a problem. Now, one thing we did do in this last session, for example, was there's a federal law called the McKinney-Vento Act, which the state's supposed to reimburse for transportation of homeless students. We hadn't funded that in several years. We put $11 million into that, which actually does affect this district as well. So some of that money came back, but the work's not done. We definitely have to make sure that regional schools get their better share of transportation costs, which is not happening.
Would you support the legalization of medical marijuana?
Yeah, this is ballot question, I believe, number 3, which is allowing for the prescription of medical marijuana for people. I'm actually personally opposed for a few reasons. One is that law enforcement, the police chiefs of Massachusetts are against it, and the local chiefs that I talk to in Abington, Whitman, and East Bridgewater, where I represent, are all against it as well. I understand, I know it's a strange thing because alcohol obviously is legal, but marijuana isn't. Marijuana grows naturally, so it's one of these things. But there's two other reasons beyond just the police chiefs feeling against it that I believe we shouldn't do it at this time, for example. One is that people think it's going to be a revenue generator. Well, there's all these people using marijuana. We can now tax it, regulate it. But the problem is, if you've seen how it's been implemented in other states, what they've done is they've created nonprofits that then take a donation to the nonprofit and give the marijuana out as a gift, or what do you say? So it's actually not taxable. So we would lose that tax revenue, which we need in some cases to deal with substance abuse and the cost associated with that. So we're not really getting the money in that we would expect to get in, first of all. And secondly, I think the other thing with medical marijuana is that if you talk to parents who have kids who are addicted to other drugs, a lot of them will say that marijuana is sort of a gateway drug to that other use. And so right now we're dealing with so many things like the abuse of OxyContin, the abuse of, and we just restricted bath salts up at the State House. All these different things happening. We're fighting a losing battle, and I don't think right now is the time to legalize marijuana and make that, again, something that could get into the hands of maybe kids as a gateway more easily at this time.
Okay. There has been an increase in the number of clients being supported by local food pantries. Do you plan to grant aid to these food pantries?
Not just plan to, but did, actually. In this last session, we'll try to do it again. A couple things, just personally, my wife has the Performing Arts School. We do events where we actually have people come and bring non-perishable items to events. I do the same thing with events that I hold in the district. But the other thing we did was we got a block grant for Abington and Whitman It's $800,000, and what it does is it allows for rehabilitation of properties that are in sad state of repair. But the other thing it does, it goes money directly to food pantries. The people who run the food pantries in Whitman-Hanson, even East Bridgewater, all contacted me and said this last year was a very difficult year because with the economy the way it was, they had really depleted stocks. So we were able to get, again, $800,000 into the district to fund that, and we're going to keep doing that because it's very critical.
Well, good for you.
Thanks.
Another ballot question, would you support the legalization of prescribing medication to end the life of a terminally ill patient?
Yeah, well, Victoria, that's another tough ballot question for me to support because there's a few things that go into that. I know they call it death with dignity, but part of the problem with that, in my opinion, is right off the bat, a doctor has to prescribe, is required to prescribe that life-ending medication based on a prognosis of your life not, the person's life not going beyond 6 months. And I don't know how many times maybe you've heard, I've heard quite a bit of people who are given a terminal prognosis and then end up not only beating that time period, but also sometimes even beating the disease completely. And so the other part that goes with this is there's no requirement for a psychiatrist to actually analyze the patient to see if they're making the decision of sound mind. And so if you combine those two, I'm not necessarily sure that it's going to achieve what you want it to do. The other thing too is that no doctor is required to be with the patient when they take that final medication. And so if for some reason they don't take it properly, they could end up in more pain than they're in now. So I just see it as flawed as the way it's written right now. Again, if there's a chance to maybe do it in a different way, I might support it, but right now I don't support the question as written.
And lastly, why do you want to represent the district?
$1 million question, right? I mean, it's something that I felt was a calling back when I first started running, when I was on the finance committee, because I wanted to try to help the towns. Again, worked for a small company. My kids were in school. My wife had a small business, and we just felt that the state wasn't making the right decisions. We've been able to, since I got into office and I was put on the Ways and Means Committee, which is the budget committee that actually steers most of the state's budget, the $33 billion budget, been able to make better decisions. And so I want to continue that process of making better decisions. I promised when I first ran for office that I would restore local aid. The cuts, we did that. $65 million put back in local aid. I promised that we would increase education funding, and not just cut it, but increase it. We did that. And I promised that we wouldn't raise taxes or fees. We did that as well. We did not raise any taxes or fees in the last two budgets. We need to continue that progress because we're still our economy is still in a fragile state, just like the national economy. We need to continue to make decisions that are best for the town to get us back on track. So that's one of the big reasons, but there's a few other reasons too. We need to continue to help seniors, veterans. We passed the Valor Act to help returning war veterans that are coming back from Iraq and Afghanistan. We need to get them back on their feet when they get over here. We're able to help them. We need to continue to help them. We need to help schools again. I've got a lot more work planned for schools. And the other thing is, even the Quinn bill, when they pulled that from the towns had to pay their 50% that the state was paying of Quinn bill. We need to continue to try to educate police officers because with that Quinn bill going, there is now no formalized training for police officers around the state, and it's important we do that. So those are just some of the examples of what I want to continue to do, and that's why I wanted to run when I first ran and why I want to continue to serve now.
Great. Well, thank you for coming in.
Thanks for having me.
I really appreciate it.
Appreciate it. Thank you very much.
That's all we have for today, Whitman-Hanson.
Honesty. Pass it on.